Hey guys, it's Megan. Welcome back to my channel. Today, Brian and I are going to talk about being a man and being afraid to talk about your mental health. I think this is a huge issue in our country, don't you?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean,
probably all over the world, not just our country.
Probably all over the world, but you know, from what I've experienced, it's been that women are much more willing and open to talk about mental health struggles than men, and I think that's problematic.
So, Brian, why do you think men are afraid to come forward with depression, anxiety, or even bipolar, schizoaffective, all those types of mental illnesses?
Even eating disorders. I think men are scared to talk about mental health because in our culture, it's taught to men from a very young age that we don't talk about our feelings and that we just get through things.
Tough
it out, man up, you know, be a man. And that may be true to some extent, but I think for men, especially for me to get the treatment I've needed to be very open with my family about my mental health so I could get treatment with my friends so they know what's going on with me. And most of all, to be open about it so that other guys feel comfortable talking about mental health diagnoses. I mean, men struggle too.
I know that you've been diagnosed with bipolar for almost 10 years, but looking back to right before you were diagnosed or right around the time you were diagnosed, how did you feel back then? Because I'm sure you've grown a lot and gotten more comfortable with your diagnosis, so now it's not as difficult to speak on it, but how did you feel back then?
Yeah, I mean, I struggled with depression and severe, like, crippling anxiety in middle school and high school, and I didn't really know what the fuck was going on with me. So getting that bipolar diagnosis was actually kind of refreshing because it put some context to what I was experiencing, to how I was feeling, and it gave me a way to get treatment moving forward. I had like really bad social anxiety in high school. I had depression. And then at the end of high school, I found alcohol and started self-medicating with alcohol in college to deal with how I felt. But I've always felt like kind of the odd one out in my family a little bit because I have this diagnosis and my brothers don't.
Looking back, do you remember what you were anxious over, or?
Everything, you know, talking to people. I was scared of talking to girls. I was scared that my homework wasn't perfect. I think part of my anxiety was feeling that perfectionist impulse. That
Carly
everything
and I
had
have
to be,
talked about that. That perfection in bipolar disorder, it really seems to go hand in hand.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I thought I needed like straight A's, perfect SAT scores in high school. I thought I needed to get into the best college. And some of that is good, but when it reaches an unhealthy point, I think it's something I need to talk about and get on medication for.
I've talked about that also with my business, that I was always striving for more, better, more success, more money.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where that's not healthy.
Why do you think it is that it's more okay among women to talk about mental health than it is among men? What do you think the difference is?
I definitely think it's difficult for both parties at this point to talk about it. It's getting better. I do think it's easier for women more so than men to talk about mental health. But like you were saying, I think that men, they are taught at such an early age to be a man and tough it out and to not show emotion or show feelings. And I just think that that is not good. I think that when someone has a baby boy, that they should teach them from a very early age, even like a toddler, on that it's okay to talk about your emotions and your feelings, and with parents to, you know, keep that line of communication open with their children, that they can come to them about anything. I think that's really important, but unfortunately not everyone grows up in a supportive household like us. So.
And you know, my parents were always encouraging to talk about feelings and emotions, but I just felt that I was scared to because I didn't want to be different. And we can only see how other people are doing on the outside. We can't see how they're doing on the inside. So the reason I said early on it's problematic that men don't talk about mental health is because then it leads to things like substance abuse and we self-medicate. Suicide, you know, men. I was just reading earlier that a man commits suicide every 20 minutes, you know.
Ugh, it's
terrible because it's it's a terrible solution. It's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and a problem that is treatable.
Gosh, that's just such a horrible statistic to hear about.
Yeah, it bummed me out a little bit.
Yeah.
It bummed me out. And I think in our culture, recently more celebrities have come out about their struggles with mental health, especially men. I saw
helps.
Michael Phelps did.
Kevin Love was open about his anxiety, and I've known of some NFL players. I think Brandon Marshall has borderline personality disorder. It's most of the time when in the media you hear about an NFL star, going buck, doing some crazy shit, and then most likely they end up in the psych ward, or there's a deeper issue going on.
And for young men to see their role models come out as having a mental health diagnosis, it empowers them to do the same thing. So that's a powerful thing.
I think it's important that when society sees a man acting erratic, not making good choices, that
Cray.
Instead of disregarding them as trash and not worthy of paying attention or helping them or staying in that person's life, we need to embrace that person and get them the help that they need, and try to understand that there's deeper issues going on. I believe that mental health issues, not only is it a chemical genetic thing, but also it's environmental. A lot of people grow up in really difficult circumstances as a child. They see things they shouldn't see as a child, and I know that that doesn't always cause a mental illness, but it can be a huge part of people having mental illness when they don't have the love and support at home that they need and deserve. And Brian and I have been fortunate to have really great supportive families. I mean, no one's family is perfect, but we've had it pretty great compared to most
good.
people.
I've always had access to psychiatrists or therapists, and in regards to the idea of like just man up and get over it, I think for me to be a man and to be strong, I need to be on medication, and I've accepted that. Back to the celebrity thing, when I know he's a divisive figure and a lot of people hate him, but when Kanye West came out as bipolar, it kind of gave me a little bit of strength and not joy, but it just made me feel good that like an A-list celebrity with a great career is gonna come out and say he's bipolar, that he's been to the hospital, that he takes medication. I think that's really something that I respect, because nobody's perfect. Nobody has a perfect life. And even among people who are rich and famous, mental illness doesn't discriminate based on that.
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't wish for anyone to go through the types of things that Brian and I have gone through, but it is comforting when a celebrity that you look up to has gone through similar things. I know Demi Lovato is someone that I look up to because she has struggled with substance abuse issues.
Yeah, she was in rehab, right?
Yeah, she was sober for 6 years, and she recently relapsed and hasn't been doing very well. So I've been thinking about her and hope that she's doing okay. But yeah, it doesn't matter how much money you have or anything like that. It can, like you said, it doesn't discriminate.
Yeah, I saw that, Justin Bieber recently opened up talking about his Xanax abuse and deep, dark depressions, and how he had to cancel like 25 shows because he was so depressed. And it just gives a better spin on mental illness. I mean, I know that you and your friend Carly are both bipolar. Do you find a lot of strength in being able to talk to her openly about it?
Yeah, I met Carly a couple of years ago through a mutual friend, and at first I didn't know that she had bipolar. I was going through my manic episode, and I had just gotten out of jail, and our mutual friend is really supportive of me, and Carly was hanging out with her, and then Carly opened up to me that she had bipolar, and then we didn't talk for a while, not for any reason, we just didn't really know each other very well, but recently we ran into each other, and it was just like we clicked, and we've been hanging out a lot. And yeah, it's great to have someone to relate to. And then even being friends with you, just therapy is great and everything, and
it has its place.
Yeah, but having a friend that completely understands when you can say, this is what I'm going through, and it's like either yeah, me too, or I've been there and I get it. It's a very comforting feeling to know someone actually gets it, not you know, like with my family, I'm grateful that they're there for me and have stood by me through everything, but they don't,
Absolutely.
it's like they don't have bipolar. So
they can't understand it fully. You know, it's kind of shameful to say I'm bipolar. It's like admitting a weakness. It's like leading with the chin. So I understand why it's not super openly talked about, and I think it's a little bit easier to come forward and say, hey, I have anxiety or depression than bipolar disorder specifically, because it's so stigmatized and it's so misunderstood. But being friends with Megan and having somebody who I feel like really understands me and has been there for me, it's just so empowering, and it's such a relief to be able to talk to somebody who has the same diagnosis, because it's sort of like you can let your shoulders down and just be like, okay, we can keep it real,
self.
you know, yeah, we can keep it 100 instead of, you know, all these smoke screens, fronting, you know, I can do that, and I need to do that to like be in the workforce, etc. You know, and I'm not going to apply for a job and put bipolar on my fucking application. But in my personal life, just having friends who, men or women, who share my diagnosis is so, it's so refreshing.
In your opinion, if men were able to come forward more often with their mental health issues, do you think that it would help lessen the suicide rates?
Yes, I've been at low points myself, but I've always maintained that hope that things will get better, and they do. They do get better. I think suicide comes from a place of complete and utter hopelessness, and if men have nobody to talk to and nobody that they're open with about how they're feeling, then you're kind of fucked, and it leads to suicide, which is just a tragedy, and it's terrible. So I think, to answer your question, the suicide rate among men would go down if it was less stigmatized to talk about mental health among men in our, you know, masculine culture. So
if you had a son, what kinds of things would you do in raising that little boy into a man? How do you think that parents can do a better job of raising their children to feel comfortable talking about mental health issues? I know recently when I went to Olympia, something that they're working on with changing the laws is to put mental health curriculum into schools, which is great.
Yeah, just like sex ed, mental health education should be encouraged. I mean, I would tell my kid, my son in particular, that I have bipolar disorder, I'm on medication. I wouldn't keep it a secret from him. So if he started experiencing those feelings that I experienced as a kid, which are very scary, you know, when you're young, you don't understand what's going on, so that he'd feel comfortable coming forward to me or his mom about how he felt, and not just so we could like put him on medication right away, but so that we could encourage, you know, therapy, or I could tell him like, I've been there, I understand how you feel. It's not the end of the world. These are just feelings, and that feelings aren't final. So
yeah, I think if I have kids someday, which I know I will, I definitely want to raise my children in such a way where I'm proactive and I'm asking them questions. I'm not just waiting for them to come to me throughout their whole childhood going into teenage years when things start to surface. I'm going to be very blunt and very communicative, not overbearing and annoying, but just letting my son or daughter or both, asking them questions like, you know, mental health issues are real. This is what bipolar disorder is. This is what depression is. This is what anxiety is. If you're ever experiencing it, or you have a friend or acquaintance that you know is experiencing it, let me know, and we will go from there and figure something out. I don't ever want things to build up and get to a place where it's past the point of no return, because early intervention is so important. Instead of just freaking out when there's a crisis, we need to do early intervention and get in front of things before they get out of control.
I mean, early intervention is crucial, and I think for me, the biggest feeling was like shame and confusion. So if I could like take some of that shame and confusion away from the way they were feeling, I could help them, and I wouldn't be afraid to put my kid on medication at the right age. I don't know what the right age to go on medication is, but I'm a strong proponent of it. I don't believe it's a weakness to take it. My psychiatrist said the other day, medication is like 45 to 50% of the solution, and then the other 50% is like lifestyle adjustments. So I
If
think
you have a child or a teenager or someone that's close to you that you think has a mental health issue, you need to address it and not just keep it to yourself, not talk about it behind the person that's going through the hard times back. Be proactive. Don't wait till there's a crisis to be like, oh, oops, I should have said something. I had suspicions a couple years ago. We live in a country where terrible tragedies happen all the time, and we need to do something to prevent that from happening and you know, make a difference, because this is very serious.
don't wait until somebody commits suicide to be like, oh, I had a feeling something was wrong with them, but I didn't ask them. You know, guy to guy, it takes courage to just go up to somebody and say something as simple as like, are you okay? You know, you seem a little down. You can be careful about how you phrase it, but there's a good feeling in somebody asking you, are you okay?
Thank you for watching this video. Brian and I want to put ourselves out there and expose our experiences so that hopefully we can help people feel comfortable talking about it and getting the help they need. And if anyone watches these videos that doesn't have a mental health issue but has a family or friend that has a mental health issue, I highly encourage you to be proactive and don't stay silent and don't keep things to yourself. Of course, you need to watch your approach, which we can do a video on that.
Yeah, be gentle, but
yeah, you don't want to be overbearing and controlling and too much, because that can freak the person out. So just basically, you know, it's like the old school rule of like being a good person. Treat others how you want to be treated.
Right.
If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.